I'm just a plain old country boy, cornbread eating country boy. We raise rupee on Saturday night, but we go to church on Sunday. I'm just a plain old country boy. Charles Kempton. I'm 90 years old. I was born in Ross County on a little home on a hillside south of Hallsville, Ohio. And the day I was born, my mother tells me, I don't remember it, but tells me that it was a day with a big flood. And my dad was out on horseback across the road. There was a barn, the house was across the road from the barn, and he was trying to round up the cattle and get them out of the flood so they didn't drown. But anyway, my earliest memories are in what's now Tar Hollow State Park, down in eastern, I guess it is, Ross County. But I very vaguely remember a big brick house, which I think we were probably the last family that lived in it, but we had a cow there, and my mother told me that when I was 4 years old, I used to take a cup out of the kitchen and go and sit with my head up against the belly of our cow to get milk to feed the cats with. And I don't remember too much about that place. We moved several times. Dad had a good job when the Depression hit. The most fun I remember was in the wintertime, we'd get on a sled and go up, or take our sleds up the hill and get on that log trail that the horses pulled the logs down on, and we'd slide from well above the house down right past the house and down that little lane, and there was hardly any cars there in that day. Very few people had cars, and so we weren't scared, and our parents weren't scared when we got to the end of the lane to go on right across the road and down into the creek that ran down the hollow. Every Christmas, Uncle Charlie, my dad's, I think his oldest brother, would come down from Springfield with a bunch of toys and clothes and stuff for us kids at Christmas time, and that was something we really looked forward to. I remember the basketball and the football that he brought us. I don't know what other toys, but it was always a happy time when Christmas time came and Uncle Charlie made his special annual trip down from Springfield to bring us Christmas. There was a church about 3 miles away, and Charleston Church. It was up on a hill, but we kids walked that 3 miles to church and back when I was still preschool, to get to church. And speaking of school, it started out as a big disappointment to me because I was a smart kid. Somebody told me when I went to college that my college entrance exam was borderline genius, but happened. And then when I did go to school, I was big for my age, and they had little individual desks, and I couldn't get my knees under the desk because I was too big, and so the other kids in the class made fun of me and talked about wanted to know how many times I'd failed and so on. And that went on for quite a while. And then 4th, 5th, and 6th grade teachers got together to have a spelling bee. And my brother and I were the last ones up. And then Bob always said that teachers gave me easier words than him because I was younger. But anyway, I spelled down one of the words that he couldn't spell, and I came out the the spelling champion of those 3 grades, although I was in the youngest of the grades. My brother and I used to ride our bicycles from home to church, even though our parents were going in the car, and though it was 11 miles away. Bob and I always wanted to ride our bicycles to church and back, and just got in the house when Dad yelled, "Charlie, the cow's going back down the hill." So I grabbed my bicycle and took off after them. I hoped to get them before they got to the bottom of the hill, but just as I got to her, she decided she wanted to cross the lane with the other cows, and I took her broadside. I must have been going 25 or 30 miles an hour anyhow, and I hit her in the side, and I and the bicycle flew over top of her, and I tore both knees out of my suit pants, and I think one of the elbows, and I was all skinned up from sliding in the gravel. When I left the school, I remember saying, "So long, farewell, adieu. I'll never darken a school door again." And I didn't want to preach, so I wrestled for a long time at the altar until finally I said, "Okay, Lord, I'll do anything you want me to do, but preach on street corners or go to Japan," because that was soon after World War II, and Japanese people were not very high on our liking list. But he steered me to Taylor University in Upland, Indiana, which is a good evangelical but good scholarly school, and I went there for 4 years. But I didn't have any scholarships. I didn't have any grants. My family was just poor farm folks, and the word that he spoke just hit me right in the heart. And I don't know why, but I just couldn't get away from that. You need to go to Japan. We went to a city and set up a tent for evangelistic services. We had children's services at 6:30 and adult services at 7:30. And every place we went, we were able to, the Lord did, we didn't, but the Lord used us to establish a church. So we left 8 new churches when I came home, and I counted up, as I started to say, the homes we visited, and the men that worked with me and I went to 1,623,000, and I think 800 and some, I don't know the hundreds, don't remember that number of homes that we went to visit in the 2 years I was over there. Lois and I had 4 children, and when I came back from Japan, I had a monthly allowance of $105, and it was crazy enough. I just don't like to leave vehicles sit outside, so I paid $5 a month for a garage for my car. Out of that $105, I felt that the Lord wanted me to go and minister in Brazil as a missionary instead of as a pastor here in the States. So we went to Brazil in 1957, and States, Estados do Norte, and 3 different times, taxi driver said, "You can't be North American, you talk like a Brazilian." I'd never heard anybody told who was a foreigner that they talked like a native, but that really shook me. I had spent 1 whole year when I first left the pastorate doing remodeling and home repairs, and the Lord gave me a gift with building, and I had built 2 parsonages. I drew the plans and supervised the building of a big church up in Warren. I had built 2 buildings for Christian schools, and almost all of it by myself. I moved to Lancaster when Kay did, and sometime later Kay and I got married, but we'd become very good friends while we were working together in the school down at Logan. And so both of them, the first time they saw Kay, said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to Charlie." During the week, and this little boy came up to her and said, "Hey, I know who you are." And she said, "You do?" He said, "Yeah, you're the walking Sunday school teacher," because she would go around visiting the kids and building up her class. But she was a tremendous blessing in my life. Thank the Lord for her. When you drive by that church, all you see is a big wall of bricks. And I thought it was too big and too fancy for me, because I'm just a plain old country boy. Still am. And we started in September with 12 kids for a Wednesday night service. They had Sunday school teachers, but he wanted more for children's ministry. So anyway, we started there in September, and by March, the 12 had grown to over 100, and it never went below 100 again. One of the things that meant the most to me, about 55 or 60 years after I came home from Brazil, I got a message from a lady. Her name was Eutalia, which the Brazilians always put Dona, meaning lady, ahead of it. But anyway, Dona Eutalia told me that I was the one that pointed her to Jesus, and that in the years since then, she had won about 25 of her immediate family members to the Lord, and about the same number of neighbors that she was not related to, but she loved Jesus, and she just talked about it and was able to win close to 50 people to the Lord. There's nothing to knock on. So the way you go is clap your hands and say, "Gomen kudasai," and when somebody comes to the door, you say, "Dozo yonde kudasai, kore wa Kristo no hon desu," which is, "Please read this. It's a Christian book." He had gotten a call from the mother, and the mother said, "What did you do to my boy?" And he didn't know at first what to expect, but she went on to tell how Mitsui-chan had never missed a service at the evening services and never missed Sunday school after the tent moved on and the pastor was having regular church services. But she said that just 10 days or 2 weeks before, he had gotten real sick, and they figured out later that it must have been food poisoning. They didn't know. But anyway, Mitsui-chan, as he lay there hurting, first started singing Yukinu, 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 every burden of my heart's rolled away. And then after a while, he sang Juware o Isu, Jesus loves me, this I know. And the mother couldn't understand anybody that was as sick as he was not being scared to death of death instead of singing. And then a little later on, he sang an old song that I haven't heard in the States for years, but it was one that somehow they were teaching over there. Shall we gather at the river, the beautiful river, gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. The biggest regret was when I failed the Lord, getting discouraged and giving up with my ex-wife, and I got into some sin there that I greatly regret, but I don't know. I really don't have too many regrets, because the Lord went with me and guided me so faithfully and provided so abundantly that His hand is so evident in my whole life that, well, the main thing is give all of your heart and life to Jesus. Wherever He leads, I'll go. Wherever He leads, I'll go. I'll follow the Christ who loves me so. Wherever He leads, I'll go. And if you'll listen to Him and walk with Him, you'll never regret it. Work just as hard at showing your love to your spouse as you did to get them to love you so they'd marry you. Don't take them for granted, and don't lose the love that you showed before you got them to be your spouse.